Hello and welcome to me debunking Nintendo Switch 2 misinformation a few days before launch. Because apparently the internet doing this for like 2 months has been absolutely worthless. And before you can call me a shill, I'm going to the launch event, so not only are you correct, but I'm making my biases plain and clear. But more importantly, when I complain about Nintendo, I have a decent idea of what I'm talking about. So let's hit the most common and ridiculous issue. That is, they are charging $90 for physical games. That is not accurate. I understand this is a result of people not understanding how currency conversions work. In the United States, before tax, Mario Kart World is $79.99 or $80 for convenience, because I don't want to say that many nines before taxes. In short, Nintendo is not upcharging for physical copies. The closest they are doing to giving you a physical copy upcharge is the fact that you do not get a $30 discount off Mario Kart World if you do not get the Mario Kart World plus Nintendo Switch 2 bundle. Additionally, regarding game pricing, Nintendo has said they are bringing back variable pricing. For example, Donkey Kong Bonanza is $69.99 or $70. Hopefully, variable pricing means that we will get games that are less than $70 and hopefully even lower than $50. Because everyone likes cheap games, and I think we need more low-budget games from big publishers. Regarding Switch 2 editions of Nintendo Switch 1 games, you do not need to rebuy the entire game. If you have the base game, you can buy the upgrade pack separately. Without the upgrade pack, the game will still work on Nintendo Switch 2. These upgrade packs seem to vary between $10 and $20 depending on what it includes. Also, like 12 games and then later, presumably more, are getting free upgrades that make them run better on Nintendo Switch 2. It seems to be if they are adding substantial amounts of content, they charge for that. If not, it's a free update. The exception being Pokemon Legends EA. I'm going to be generous and assume that the Switch 2 edition has some exclusive features. Additionally, if you have Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack, the upgrade packs for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are included with that. You can, however, buy Nintendo Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games at retail. These versions of the game are compatible with both systems. The retail versions of Switch 2 edition games are basically just the Switch 1 version of the game, except the upgrade pack is already on the cartridge, and it should be compatible with both systems. Similar to how a good chunk of games for the Game Boy Color were technically Game Boy original games that took advantage of the color and additional processing power, and maybe the infrared blaster. That ties us into game key cards. To address immediate concerns regarding the game key cards, all first-party Nintendo games will be included on the cartridge. The game key card is an option for third-party publishers. I understand this is basically a result of Nintendo going, hey, if you want to publish, you have 3 options: digital, 64GB card, and game key card. I assume this is related to production issues and will be resolved as time goes on. Additionally, not all third-party games are on key cards. There is a notable chunk, however, you can look at the packaging and determine this. Additionally, game key card things are not exactly new. The earliest that I'm aware of was a Tony Hawk game on the Xbox 360 where the disc was basically just a demo and you downloaded the rest. And the reason you need to quote download unquote is because the systems cannot read from a disk quick enough, so you install to an internal hard or solid state drive. This decreases load times and means that the physical condition of the disk is less of a concern. As a fun fact, this sort of functionality was added to the 360 at some point during its lifespan. You could install games from your own disk and then basically just use the disk to verify that you owned the game. A better example of the game key card system already being around on Xbox would be the backwards compatibility. When you put a 360 game on a current Xbox, you download that game because the version contained on the disc is not compatible with the current Xbox hardware. I will state, Breath of the Wild Nintendo Switch 2 edition, not including the DLC, at least when played on Nintendo Switch 2, is kind of dumb. There is another conversation to be said about the fact that the game is 7 years old and is still $60 new. That is kind of lame. I would be way more willing to buy old Nintendo games if they went down in price more often, especially at retail. because I hate downloading things. Who would have guessed? For clarity, game key cards tie your license to the cartridge so you can sell it if you want. It is not a download code in a box, which is stupid, and apparently sticking around. Now that we have covered games themselves, let us talk about the EULA update. I understand Nintendo has basically gone and said, if we detect you are modding your system, we're going to brick it. This isn't really any different than what has been going on since the days of the Wii. Modding your system inherently introduces risk, even if Nintendo isn't trying to stop you. You can always brick a system by modding it. They are potentially being significantly more aggressive about it, but time will tell if this even is going to be a long-term concern. Best case, it's kind of hard to do a soft mod on the Nintendo Switch 2. Worst case, you have to do a hard mod. And if you're doing a hard mod, you're presumably installing mod chips, which I'm sure will include some way to get around bricking your system. Because who would have guessed an industry that typically loses money or makes a couple dollars off of their consoles, and therefore makes almost all of their money off of game sales, would want to make sure you are buying games. You also do not need to state your intent to pirate stuff in a comment section. If you're going to do it, just do it or don't. All you are doing is removing your own plausible deniability. For everyone saying just get a Steam Deck, in case it wasn't stated earlier, I have a Steam Deck. It's pretty cool and I really like it. So while I do think the Steam Deck is pretty cool, there is one thing that we do need to remember. While the Steam Deck is effectively the consoleization of PC gaming, at the end of the day it is still a portable gaming PC. So, the Steam Deck is basically a handheld PC, and that includes the trappings of being a PC. Consoles are notably known for being sold on the idea of, you do not want to put in any thought aside from I put the game with the matching logo in this box. It should just work now. While the customization of a PC is its greatest strength, it is also its greatest weakness in going mainstream. Customization is like its greatest strength. However, same time, its greatest weakness. The average consumer does not want to bother putting any more thought other than matching logos. Again, that is another conversation. Also, for clarity, the DLC for Breath of the Wild should work on Nintendo Switch 2, regardless of which edition you have. My complaint was that the Switch 2 edition does not include it in the purchase. As previously stated, it's because the game is 7 years old and it should have been included. Like newer copies of New Super Mario Bros. U on the Wii U, including Super Luigi U, towards the end of the system's life. Hopefully this video has been informative, because most people forget that the number one rule of being a hater is not hating, but instead knowing what you're talking about. I am also aware that most of the people making these complaints have a good % chance of being a literal child, but I want it to be argumentative. Also, this is a certified, I'm like 95% sure everything I've said in this video is accurate, including my opinions, because they are all objectively correct. And no, I don't normally talk like this.